The simple truth is that it is not about how hard you work. It's about what you work on. And I think if I had to attribute one thing towards my success, the one reason I've been as successful as I have over the space of the last 10 years I've been doing this, it's picking the right thing. 95% of success, I'm being honest, is picking the right vehicle to get to your destination. And sometimes this is kind of something I struggle with. And I just came back from a run here in New York. I'm in New York closing off the biggest deal of my life. And it's funny, sometimes I almost feel like I have survivor's guilt, where the last time I was in New York was 7 years ago, and obviously I've come a decent way since then. And something about the energy of this city, and something about just even while I was running early morning, just looking around at everyone working their asses off, quite frankly, like giving it their all. I look at delivery drivers, I look at street cleaners, I look at people going to their jobs. And to be honest, these people have probably worked so much harder than I have. And that's the truth of it. And I'm also not afraid to admit that. I hate this whole thing online of like, you just need to work harder. You just need to work harder. It's like, okay, well then why is it that a lot of the hardest working people never get compensated accordingly to how hard it is they work? And by the way, the other thing I see online, this whole like trying to shit on workers or 9-to-5ers. I just think that's the most whack thing ever. I think it's incredibly disrespectful. I think it's incredibly cringe. I've always tried to motivate people to work harder. I've always used 10 years of me uploading on YouTube as a case study of, what's possible, but not once have I ever dunked on people who have gone that path. I've said, listen, there's an easier path, there's a better path. And, of course I want to motivate and inspire people to take action. And the reason I push you guys to take action is because you've had your eyes open. You know something that other people don't. I know that if you're in this space, you might think, well, everyone knows about entrepreneurship. Everyone knows about the opportunities that are out there. Everyone knows about online business. But you got to remember that a lot of people, we're in a world and we're in a bubble, and the entire world hasn't had their eyes open in the same way that you have. I know that maybe they said you live in this echo chamber where you think everyone wants to be an online entrepreneur. Everyone understands the opportunities that are out there, and everyone's, spending time on this side of YouTube or on Twitter, or that everyone's TikTok feed looks like your TikTok. No, a lot of people are blissfully unaware, quite frankly. And all those people are trying their goddamn best. It's just, you have had your eyes open. So because you've had your eyes open, I think you owe it to yourself to not make things harder than they need to be. And as I said, I think this is just something that I was thinking about on my run here as I'm coming up towards sort of that next step in my career. And that next step in my career was only a possibility because I chose the right vehicle. And I spent the last 10 years working in the right vehicles to get me to this point. Now, it's very simple, okay? I'll put this quite simply so you can understand. Let's say you were trying to get to a destination and you had a few options to get there. If you walked, it would take you 1 year to get to the destination. Maybe if you ran, if you could even, stomach running the entire way, and you could actually survive that kind of journey, it takes you 4 months. Now you have the option to drive, and that takes you a week. Or you can take a flight, and it takes you 4 hours. Now, the person who decides to take a flight and the person who decides to walk, is the person who takes a flight, are they any more hardworking than the person who decides to walk? No, in that case, you would probably argue that the person who walks has worked substantially harder. They just didn't choose the right vehicle to get to their destination. Now, maybe the person who decided to fly, they had to spend some money to get there, or they invested a bit of money to make sure the vehicle that they're in gets them to the destination quicker. Now, maybe another person also decides to, invest a bit of money in the form of fuel, and they decide to take a car there, but they also invested money just like the person who took the plane, but they didn't invest in the right vehicle, okay? And I think when you break it down like this and you actually think about it from this perspective of like, we're all trying to get to a destination. Now, everyone's destination is different. I want to make that clear, and that's also cool. I honestly think for most people, they want freedom. And it's funny, like as you start to get into the higher echelons of your career, like in a way you have a lot less freedom. I'll be honest, I have a lot less freedom now than, I did a few years ago. That's just a decision I've made as to wanting to get to a different destination in life. But no matter what destination I go to in life, I want to make sure that I'm using the most efficient vehicle to get there. And yeah, when you think about it like that, everyone agrees, like everyone understands that if you're trying to get to a destination, you have a choice of vehicles, you have a choice of options to actually get you to that destination. But when people think about that in terms of their career, for some reason, they don't think like that.